Viewers perceived a UFO, UAP activity, as well as strange life forms, energetics, devices, portals, vortices, openings, and more. The area of interest expands well outside the boundaries of the specified target, meaning the ranch.
Welcome back. I am here again with David Morehouse. David, always good to see you, my friend.
It's good to be here again, Sean.
Okay, so you recently did this gigantic project for the Rocky Mountain Ranch episode of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. Unfortunately, it didn't appear on the episode for reasons we'll delve into at the very beginning of this.
Sure.
But the History Channel did do you a solid and put up video of the segment that they edited that would have been included if they had enough space. Instead, I think they focused on rockets and isn't that amazing and things like that. But the segment I thought was excellent on the History Channel.
Yeah.
However, because it was about 5 minutes, a little over 5 minutes, they left out a gigantic volume of the data. And first of all, I want to thank you for spending time with me to go through this, because we're going to go through this across 3 episodes because there's so much of it.
Yeah.
But I think from what I've seen, it's extremely fascinating. So with that, if you could just give us a brief overview of the assignment, kind of what happened, and then we'll dive into the data.
So this was episode 3 of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And I knew going into it that it was not going to be an episode about remote viewing. It was an episode about the ranch that we were supposed to be looking at. The beauty of it is that we were, for the first time ever, employing remote viewing, as kind of an enigma penetrator to look at what was going on in the ranch. I think everybody at History Channel, from executives to the production company, they didn't really know what remote viewing was going to be like or how it was going to apply here.
Mm-hmm.
They just knew that they wanted to do it. And one of their producers that came to me and found me, we worked and talked about this for almost a year, really, just almost a year, talking about doing this and how we were going to do it. If people have not done remote viewing and don't know anything about it, maybe haven't read my book or somebody else's book on it, won't have a good feel for it. The producers, the directors within the production company, they struggled with, what's this going to be? And then, in meeting Travis and Eric, along with the 2 show hosts, I know Travis got really excited about it, as did Eric. The other 2 guys, it wasn't really up their alley, to be thinking about it. It wasn't that they weren't fascinated by it. It's just they were worried about what they were going to have to do in presenting on the show. And of course, Travis and Eric are old hands at that. And what Travis, I think, was most taken aback by was simply the fact of the volume of data that was produced. And when a volume of data like that comes out, it's an extraordinarily difficult thing for them to try to figure out, how they're actually going to stuff it into a show. I mean, the show's 38 minutes or 43 minutes, something like that, because of commercial time. And so in 38 to 43 minutes, they have to build their show. And the recipe for success that's in their mind is that they are doing, mini episodes that are trying to stuff in there everything that they stuff in Skinwalker Ranch. And that's a challenge to begin with. And in every episode, there are experiments and experimenters that participate in the show, and they have to sit and figure out which one has the most visual impact and which one has most sound bites that they can easily throw into this, to fit the recipe and be able to build a show and stay within the framework of 38 to 43 minutes. So again, there have been a bunch of different shows that I have done that are based solely on remote viewing. There was Beyond Belief and Proof Positive and There was Unsolved Mystery, Unsolved History. There have been a whole bunch of different shows that have just shown remote viewing, either in law enforcement or in some other kind of experiment stuff that they were doing. And remote viewing has always, come through and demonstrated what it was capable of doing in the right way. So those were shows about remote viewing. And that's, if you want to do a show about remote viewing, that's how it has to be done. Remote viewing, because of the complexity of it, doesn't really lend itself to a 5-minute soundbite. And there are certainly distinct visuals, as we will show here. But it's a question of, if you're going to show that, you have to talk about that. And when I was there, taken to the ranch, to not Skinwalker Ranch, but the Begone Skinwalker place, they called it the ranch, I think, Rocky Mountain Ranch, I think was what they called it. And that location, the actual location, is still, I guess, guarded because they just don't want people showing up out there at that ranch. And of course, that's what would happen. People would go out there, drive down the road, park their car, because that's just, some people feel like they're entitled to do stuff like that. And the rancher and his family, live out there in the middle of nowhere because they like their privacy.
They want to get away from people.
Yeah,
right.
They don't want people showing up outside like that. So it was no surprise to me when I presented for almost 4 hours, which they were like, holy crap. They didn't anticipate that. And despite the fact that I sat down with directors and producers and said, here's all the stuff I've got, and then they would come and say, well, we got to chop that. We don't want that, chop that. And it got to the point where I just looked at the person that was there with me, helping me do some of the analysis and stuff, and just went, yeah, I don't care. I'm not cutting it out. They can, leave it off on the cutting room floor if that's what they want to do, but I'm not going to cut it out of the briefing, because it just won't, there's no way I can pare this down for 6 minutes.
Well, didn't you have so much data that they ran out of batteries for the cameras?
Yeah. Well, first of all, where the recording was being done was not in a studio. They did it in this garage, is where they were doing it. And they had a metal table that somebody had been tearing engines apart on, or so it looked like it or smelled like it. And, behind us, or, in the shot, is nothing but the stuff you would find in somebody's garage, right? There's motor oil, boxes of motor oil, and fan belts, and you name it. And then they had a simple little monitor set up, and I had my laptop there plugged into the monitor, but then it was a 3-camera shoot. And then the show hosts and this woman by the name of Katie, who was the woman that was associated with this ranch back when she was a child in the mid-70s, which is really where the story was being built around. That person, those 3 people were there, and I was basically briefing them. But in the briefing of it, it was 4 hours long, and we were there, and they didn't set up lights, and the sun went down, which they didn't anticipate that was going to happen. And so now it's like, crap, big break, and they had to set lights up so we could continue on. And then as well, just as you mentioned, they had to replace, SSD drives on the cameras, and they had to replace batteries because they didn't anticipate filling everything up and running down all their camera batteries in this briefing. But it was an involved briefing. It was 4 hours on camera briefing the data. And then about 2.5 weeks later, it's another 2 hours briefing Travis and Eric, along with the same people that were there in the room that I was talking to that day. So in all, there was to pitch this, and to brief it and to show it all to the people that meant something as show hosts that are there. It was about 6 hours of work to do that. It was a year in planning. It was 6 hours to brief it. And oh my God, it took really the better part of about 3 weeks to get 3 target sessions done, compile thousands of pages from remote viewer summaries, and go through and analyze all of this to capture sketches and verbal sensory data and other stuff, and try to figure out, what's going to work on camera, what won't. So you're moving through thousands of images and thousands of pieces of verbal data. And this is the harvesting that you have to do from an analytical perspective. I mean, I didn't know precisely what was needed for the show, but based on what I did know, the limited read on that I was given, I mean, my job was to be the program manager. So my job was to be the liaison between the viewers and this target. And that required a huge amount of effort. And it did that for a couple of different reasons. I mean, first of all, you know, you had 70 remote viewers from 6 different countries. It has never been done like that before. Never. And I trained all of these remote viewers, and I trained them in exactly the same protocols that I was trained in when I was in the remote viewing unit at Real Flame and then Stargate and in Sunstreak. I was there when it was Sunstreak, I believe, and then it became Stargate shortly after I left. But yeah, I trained these 70 viewers. They've been my students, and I have thousands of students now, but 70 of them volunteered to do this work from 6 different countries. And when you start looking at that, that's, 3,800 pages of data and 3,000, separate data points. And that's a conservative. That's 3,000 separate data points that were harvested on 3,800 pages of data for these targets, these 3 targets that they worked. It was just an overwhelming volume of information. So we really started.
And you were collating this stuff yourself. You had no help.
No, I had the help of 3 people.
Yeah. Okay.
I had 3 other remote viewers to help me do it. So the way this unfolds is you give the viewers a target briefing, and the target briefing just says, I want you to employ this technique to do this thing. There were 2 map sensing targets, one horizontal, one vertical. And then there was a CRV or ERV, so coordinate remote viewing or extended remote viewing, depending upon the skill level that was particular viewers were trained in. And I'll show you the stats on that. And that's how that had to work. So when you get their briefing, they're given their coordinates, and then they go do their work. They do their session summaries. They have an upload link where they have to upload their stuff into a Dropbox link. And then none of the viewers can see what the other viewers are doing. They just hit the Dropbox link and throw it in. It's a private link, and it goes in there. I just go into those Dropbox, we download them, we print them off, and then we all sit around and look, and we start harvesting data, And as we harvest data, we're scanning sketches, capturing verbal descriptions and other things. And what we're really looking for is correlation of data. We're not necessarily looking for juicy tidbits. We're looking for correlation of data.
Or confirmatory data, because you knew the target, but the remote viewers did not.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm, one of the first things you have to do in the analysis is to establish if you think your viewers are on target. So if you're looking at a ranch, then you need to be able to see in what the viewers are producing. You need to be able to see verbal and visual sensory data that supports that, right? That's just how you start to anchor knowing where the viewers are. If everybody's, describing a cruise ship and you know that it's a ranch, in the Midwest, then you know that this viewer is not on target. So those kinds of sketches don't apply. You wouldn't put that in there. Nobody did that in this group, but that's my point. You're looking for data that correlates and confirms that they're on target, they're on the location, and they're all looking and seeing data that correlates. And I can assimilate that, I can pull it together, and I can brief it, and I can show sketches, and I can show verbal sensory data supporting those sketches. And then that's meaningful to the individuals that are looking at this. I mean, why would remote viewing be such an interesting tool to use in the Skinwalker series? It was too late to get outside, the History Channel's recipe for success on this, which is, Skinwalker Ranch is doing well. It's all the experimentation. It's all of the, the scientists talking about the anomalies and the unexplained activity that's there. And that appears to be working. I'm not sure how much longer that's going to work. That recipe may have to be changed a little bit because I think people are going to grow impatient with the same kinds of tests and the same kinds of things being done, but nothing ever being explained. I mean, if you're not going to blow that bluff apart there at Skinwalker Ranch and find out what's in there, and you're going to squeak it along for another 2 seasons, I think people are getting to the point now where they are impatient with that. I know that you can go and read what people say about Oak Island and stuff now in its 11th season. I mean, can't argue with 11 seasons, right? It's in syndication now. But I mean, people are getting really frustrated with the fact that the gold never is found kind of thing. So I think what their History Channel is thinking about now is how do we actually start utilizing something that gives us in episodes, at least, albeit not 100% accurate and can't be presented as an absolute. Remote viewing pulls together pieces of information that then provide some level of answers from a blind or double blind process that is interesting to people. Now, some people, of course, will discount it and think it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm sure History Channel got some criticism, on history.com just for using remote viewers. But also a lot of people were really jazzed that they did, including, Travis and Eric, because when they saw the data, they just thought, my God, this can help steer some of the experiments that we do. And so knowing this up front, the capability up front would be really powerful. So I know that there's discussion about how will they do this? Would they be able to do this? How long did this take to do? And again, it still would be something that's going to have to be compacted. And we have to figure out how to do that, because at best, whether they drop off some of the experiments and they use more of the remote viewing, and I'm not sure that's going to work for them, but to, shoehorn remote viewing in there, the results of it is going to require some really careful thought. So I don't know how History Channel will orchestrate this in the future. I just know that there are discussions about doing it. And, it may just get to the point where it's just like in the too hard to do category. But if you're an avid watcher and listener to Through a Glass Darkly, go on history.com and tell them you want to see more remote viewing. And you can also go there and you'll see the segment in remote viewing. So I was actually in Chicago filming an episode on The Unexplained with William Shatner, and I'm doing the Chaco Canyon story, but different. And when I was getting on the plane to fly back home, I got an email from History Channel that said, hey, we're really sorry, but we just couldn't fit the remote viewing segment into episode 3. However, we did edit and color and time a segment, a part of the remote viewing segment. And, we're going to put that on history.com for you to use. So that's there. And then the statement was made that, if we get to a second season, there's a discussion, that we may try to figure out a way to use AI to, analyze the data more quickly, which that's going to be a challenge too, because you're going through and analyzing viewers' hand-drawn sketches and, handwriting and a lot of other things. I'm sure AI can do it. It's just, that's a whole nother project and a whole nother discussion.
Where can they find the comment section on the vignette that the History Channel did for you?
If you want to make comments, you don't go history.com. You go to History Channel's YouTube site for episode 3 of Beyond Skinwalker Ranch. And that's where you can make comments.
Okay, so why don't I go there now? And we'll put in a comment.
Yay. There you go. Amazing. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing, Sean. If the people watch your show and listen to it, this would be a really good thing to do just because it can help, push this over the top for them to help them do this, help them see the wisdom of doing this, because this would be really good to use remote viewing the way we teach it and the way we do it as a credible tool and a credible piece of information that helps, the people who are watching these shows understand, again, we're not presenting it as as an end all or as an absolute. We always talk about it in terms of, it being not 100% accurate and all of the rules that apply to the use of it. Mm-hmm. But it does piece some things together and give the people that are watching History Channel Beyond Skinwalker Ranch, it gives them something where things get pieced together. And even with people looking at that and going, okay, well, we understand it's not 100% accurate, but if 70 people are describing the same thing from 6 different countries, there's something credible there, right?
Yeah, and you can look at statistically significant samples because you have well over 30 data points for each item that you look at.
Oh, it was crazy, the amount of stuff that went into this. I mean, crazy.
Sorry for the diversion. I just thought it was important enough so that people could support the effort.
I absolutely agree. I really appreciate that. I think that'd be really good for them, for the viewers here to do that. Let me just take you kind of through how this thing went. And this is the briefing that I gave Travis and Eric and the others about what the viewers would be capable of doing. There were a total of 3 targets that were going to be done, 3 target packages. It wasn't just kind of an in and out on each target. The targets were, aside from target number 3, the targets were really involved. And this first one, target 1, the concept of the target was present time. And that is told to the viewers. It's a concept of the target is present time, but they're not told anything else except that they're going to be doing a map sensing. Now, years ago, that used to be called map dowsing, but dowsing connotes a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
Yeah, it sounds a little too woo, where sensing sounds a little bit more professional and analytical.
Right. And all remote viewers are trained, all of them that I train, when we get to a certain point, they're taught how to do map sensing, because I was taught how to do map sensing in the remote viewing unit, and it was used, and sometimes quite effectively and sometimes not so effectively. Again, we had 10 viewers when I was there at one time. And so if you got 10 viewers and they could, match points together, then those became effective. I do know that there was a huge DEA drug bust in the open sea that was done utilizing map sensing, and all of the viewers, clustered a particular point as described as a hot spot when it's put together. It's major clusters and minor clusters. I'll show that to everybody here in a minute. But because a major cluster was in this particular place, and the idea of what was happening is that there were 3 open water freighters that had come out of, packed with cocaine, hidden inside of them. And what they did was, rather than go to a port, the 3 of them converged in a particular location because they figured that they were being tracked, but they at that time weren't being tracked by satellites like they could be now. But they converged in the open ocean east of Hawaii somewhere and transloaded all the cargo onto another ship that then went into a port someplace. And that was the intention, but the DEA kept watching in that area. And when those ships converged and the other one came for the transload, they just jumped on them, and then they had this huge bust. And, everybody in the unit got challenge coin from the DEA with a really cool letter, that said, really, thank you for your help in doing this stuff. I always thought that was really funny because, my colleague, Lynn Buchanan, who had not been in any special ops units or, other stuff like that, didn't know what the challenge coin was. He actually thought it was a medal. So it's not a medal. It's not a medal. And
I thought that was like an Army-wide thing. I guess maybe intelligence, but if you're in combat arms, you know all about challenge coins.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. been in a shower in the Ranger battalion, and one of my lieutenants come in with a challenge coin stuck in the crack of his ass, and then walk in the middle of the shower, and and then squat, and the coin drops out. And then if you don't have your coin when the coin is flashed, right, you have to buy. So it was just really funny that somebody would think of something that, that crazy. He's a West Point grad, so what can I say?
Well, that explains why he had a coin up his ass.
He's a good guy. He was a really good.
I'm just all the West Pointers out there. I love you guys. So, you'll
too. Yeah.
You'll appreciate it. I probably shouldn't have cursed on my own podcast, but it's,
it's what, ass?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's just a part of the anatomy. It was a clever place to hide it as you walk in the shower and then drop it. And then, of course, nobody else is going to think to bring theirs in. So and the rules are, if the coin is down, if somebody throws the coin down, you have to either answer it with a coin, your coin, or if you don't, you have to buy. You're buying lunch or buying beers or buying whatever. And this lieutenant, who now is a big global banker of all things, but he was a really, really good officer, very fine young officer.
I think my two highest challenge coins are actually pretty interesting. One was from General McKiernan. For folks who are watching, will know General McKiernan as the general that Obama relieved in Afghanistan. So I have when he was a 2-star, I just for a day, I briefly worked as a protocol officer to escort him around, whatever. And then the other one I have is from Ash Carter before he became Secretary of Defense, but I think it was when he was Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Procurement, and Logistics. And I think at one point he was Deputy Secretary of Defense too. But anyway, it's from that time. Those are the two best ones I have.
Yeah, everybody's got them now. They're really crazy.
You probably have some 4-stars, I bet.
I have a 4-star. Yeah. My son, I told you, is a command sergeant major in the Army, and he's a military policeman. And when he was a company first sergeant, they designed a challenge coin. I swear that thing is this big around, and it's a bottle opener. Okay.
Anyway, both of us have to focus.
Yeah. We're up. Yeah, we're gone. Okay. So back to this first target. The first target was going to be the sensing target. And so how the sensing target works, is it's basically 4 targets in one, because what they have to do is they're given 4 papers that I'll show you what they look like. And then they have to, and it'll just say target 1A on it. And target 1A is 9,000 feet above ground level. Target 1B is 12,000 feet above ground level. And target 1C is 42,000, and target 1D is 100 miles. It's satellite photo.
Any particular reason these heights were chosen?
They're arbitrarily chosen. It came from doing a pretty detailed map analysis, from a satellite image, and also actually using cartographic map, and using a 1/50,000 map, and kind of looking at it and trying to determine, based on the size, the dimension of the property, which heights would allow me to get the viewers to sense the entire property. Because essentially the intent of the target, that they're not told specifically this, but the intent of the target is to find hotspots. We want to see where hotspots are. Now, hotspots are not defined for them, except they know that it means there's something there. Something could be someone, it could be activity, it could be something else, right? They don't know that they're doing something for Skinwalker Ranch or beyond Skinwalker Ranch. They only are told they're doing something for History Channel. And then they're all sworn to secrecy, because I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And there's always a huge concern in the industry that somebody participates in something like this, and then before the show airs, they run out, and go on a show like this or some other show and talk about it. and they didn't want that to happen. And so all of the viewers had to operate under the same agreement, non-disclosure agreement that I did. So back to these targets, though, it was 9,000 feet above ground level was about as high up as I had to go to be able to encompass the entire property. And then what happens is you go up, 12,000 feet because it gives a bigger piece of the world. And then at 42,000 feet, even bigger, and 100 miles up, now it gives me a layout of the entire area. And you'll see how the data starts to reshape itself as the viewer's perception is raised up in the different targets as they're sensing. There's still clustering of data, major clusters and minor clusters, but the data begins to shape differently. And that was very powerful. I'd actually never seen 70 viewers produce 4 different pieces of data that were then pulled together, in this target briefing. And it became a very powerful tool for Travis, Eric, and all the others to be able to look at that and go, oh, what goes on in this place follows that kind of a path. And then Katie, who as a young girl at this place, who had all of these different kinds of encounters and things, is the one that went, yes, I see, why this is where I saw this and this is where I saw that. Now, I didn't know any of the things that they were investigating there at all. I just knew where the target was, and I heard some of Katie's history, but I didn't know specific things they were looking for or specific locations on the ranch. So this was purely an open search to sense out each viewer, 70 viewers, sensing 4 different points, 1 point at each of those altitudes on a sheet. And then those sheets all have to be converged as target 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, and that gives you different clustering at different altitudes. So it paints a picture of the expansion of these hotspots or elongation of the hotspots. And again, I'll show you when we show that feedback that there are always outliers. There are people that, sense something over here and weren't part of the bigger clusters. And that's okay. That's how remote viewing works. Target number 2 was structured as a present time vertical map sensing target. So now it's the same effort, but it's simply in increments moving across the vertical plane, right? So now think of it like if you have a map.
So if your map's like this, you're looking at this part.
Yeah, I can't see you though.
Yeah, I'm holding up my left hand. It's like knife hand, right? Mm-hmm. And then I'm holding a flat hand beneath it, perpendicular to the left hand.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
so your surface map is
if you go into Time Machine on a Mac and it pulls that stuff up, boom, 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 like that, right? So the same thing, only you're looking at it like this, and then there's another and another and another. The ranch was longer than it was wider. It's only, surprisingly, it's 1 kilometer long and it's half a kilometer wide. So what you do is you take the half a kilometer and you divided it up into 4 equal increments. So now that becomes the same kind of thing. That becomes a target 2A, B, C, and D, right? Mm-hmm. And then when we go to target number 3 was structured as a pastime target. So you had 2 present time map sensings, and then you had 1 to describe what took place in a particular event arc of time. And the event arc of time took place in 1976, and we were going to have them look at this between 2100 hours on the 3rd of April, 1976 till 0300 hours on the 4th of 1976. So a 6-hour time mark is what you're looking at, called an event arc of time. And that is kind of like this. That's kind of what that looks like. This is an event arc of time that's done and used in class when I teach, because this shows an event arc of time for the sinking of the Titanic and all of the decisions made by 7 different people. 7 people made key critical decisions that led to the sinking of the Titanic. And that's just showing an event arc of time for 7 people in that disaster. And you can see the purple is the moment that it strikes ice at 11:40 p.m. That's that. So all the decisions that go up to it and all the decisions made after it. And that actually changes in construct. It can get much more complex as you go to it, because if you were to go back to that, and then you're looking at that as the event arc of time that has not only the key players input along that XAXB axis, but if you start now looking at the vertical stack of different people and different players, so one person says one thing that influences 43 other people, and that influences, and all of these other moments can be individual moments, all compiling into a collective moment. And I know that's not what we're here to talk about, but this is the kind of stuff that remote viewers are trained and taught about. I mean, you can only imagine if that's just 7 people,
right,
what it would look like if you were looking at the 2,000 people roughly that were on the ship, and all of the different event arcs of time that complicated, exacerbated all that went on in that episode. So, I mean, in that event. So back to this again, that's what we're looking at. We're going to send them for a 6-hour event arc of time. And we want 70 viewers looking at that event arc of time. They know it's 6 hours in 1976. They don't know where it is. They don't know what happened or why it happened or anything else. They just know they're doing a project for History Channel. And there's no wink, wink, and there's no, slide something under the table, let them know. That's not how remote viewing works. And if I did something like that, I would just get a boatload of garbage that really would not play. So front loading is never done completely. Front loading ends up being something like it's a pastime target, 1976, right? 2100 on the 3rd of April till 03 on the 4th of April. That's called a limited front load. So,
and the events that you're talking about I think these events are covered in George Knapp and Colm Kelleher's book, The Hunt for the Skinwalker, I believe. It's not about Skinwalker Ranch, but I think Rocky Mountain Ranch is covered. There's a section on it in there, I think.
Yeah. And I know Katie, the woman that was affected in this event arc of time as a younger girl, I believe teenager. She's writing her book about, her story here and what happened. Anyway, just let me caution everybody. Please don't drive out to this ranch and drive on it. You probably get a rifle shot in the head by the rancher. He's already made it very clear they don't want people out here. So we're not encouraging you to do that. But if you want to know more about what took place out there, Sean's mention of that book could probably be a good place to start. Yeah. So the next part of the briefing is to show Travis and Eric et al. How trained remote viewers that have been trained specifically in the remote viewing protocols that were utilized as an intelligence collection methodology. The ones that were trained all the way through 6 stages, maybe not those that were just trained in 3 stages, but it works in this fashion. You've got each viewer, on target 1A has to find 4 points. On target 1B, sensing 4 points. Target 1C, sensing 4 more points, 4 more points. For each one of the points that they actually sense, so every time they sense a particular hotspot, they have to go over and they have to actually, on a piece of paper, write a summary. That my perceptions of the target were, that I doused, or rather sensed. I saw this, I felt that, heard this, smelled that, tasted this, temperatures were, anything that they can generate. So some of the viewers will generate 1 piece of paper for each point. Some viewers will generate 3 or 4 pieces of paper, full pages of verbal and sensory data for every point that they get. So if you look at that, you could end up with just huge amounts of data just from that. Just viewers that produced 1 page like that, it ended up being vast amounts of data for us to have to analyze. That's what you're looking at here, is what 1 viewer does. on this target using this type of methodology. So,
And these guys did it pro bono, just for the love of it, basically.
yes, for the love of it, and to be capable of showing the world the difference between somebody who's a medium or, reads tarot cards, or a shaman or something else, who many of them claim to be remote viewers and are not. The difference between that and someone who was trained in the actual CIA, DIA protocols that were used as intelligence collection methodologies, the distinct difference that has to be. And that was one of my conditions when I took this project on, as I was really clear to History Channel, I get to pick the viewers and they all have to be trained by me. And, the question was why? Because I want this. I want consistency of product. That's why. I'm not going to have somebody, come back with some, after they stroked their cat or, did something else and burned some incense.
So David, Madame Cleo's not good enough?
No, not at all.
I can't call Madame Cleo in the Psychic Friends Network and get the same analysis?
Although I'm sure she would have loved to participate, but I'm not going to try to analyze that kind of stuff. To me, that's parlor trick stuff, and I'm not interested in that. That's not what remote viewing is. And I can't say it's never happened, but I mean, my students come away understanding how distasteful I find that to be, so not that Madame Cleo is distasteful, but relegating remote viewing to a parlor trick that I can't stand for.
Look, some of this stuff might work independent of remote viewing, but the fact is, with remote viewing, you trained everyone on a very specific protocol. They're using a very specific protocol, and that very specific protocol generally yields very specific results that you understand to some degree where it's coming from. Whereas, you can't test or assess somebody who claims to have psychic abilities. They might very well have psychic abilities, but you're equally likely to find frauds and use things or methodologies that work may work in very different ways. Like this, exactly. You kind of know exactly what you're getting.
And then you're just looking at crap that's all over the map, right? You're just like, what are you talking here? So the viewers in doing this sensing are taught 3 different methodologies for doing that. I don't want to get into those right now, but they're given instruction on 3 different methodologies for doing it. And then everybody develops and practices the methodology that works best for them. And that's what they get stronger in. It's good to be well-rounded and know how to do them all, but everybody picks their favorite, right, to do it. But you're looking at this whole diagram here, and you have to realize that just in looking at this, there's 20 pages of summary data from the combining of 1A, B, C, and D. And
at a minimum, right? Those are summary pages. Yeah, those are summary pages, right?
Yeah, at a minimum. And then you get the viewer has to do what is called a grand summary. And in the grand summary, now they are looking and combining all their verbal visual data, their sensed points, and they're looking at all of their target summaries, in the ones that are in the middle there. And then you follow the red line, and now they have to do grand summaries. Now, the grand summary, again, some viewers are not real verbose, so it can be a page, but others develop, because now they're combining all their sketches and they're correlating their verbal sensory data and other things. They, in these grand summary pages that take the 5 pages from target 1A minimum, could end up being 3 or 4 or 5 more pages, because now it's kind of codified in their head and they're kind of pulling it out now and looking at their session and coming back with it. So just looking at this is where you start to understand just the sheer volume of data that can come from one viewer in doing just this one target. Now you put 70 viewers in this. It was just overwhelming. I mean, when it came in, it was uploaded, as I said, to Dropbox. I was just like, holy heck, I mean, my gosh, I had no idea. That's when I'm on the phone, like calling people. I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need some help to this.
Just the summaries alone, right? So you have 5 times 4, so that's 20. You have 70 remote viewers. So at a minimum, before all the extra sketches, you're looking at 1,400 pages of data before you add the other stuff. All right. Sorry.
Yeah. So in target 2, which is the vertical sensing, just to simplify this, I just showed you target 2, but it's actually target 2, A, B, C, and D. So it actually looks like that, but just not to bother you with repeat on it. It just narrowed this one down like this. So it's the same setup. You're doing the same thing for A, B, C, and D. So the results that they came up with. The first thing you're given is a concept briefing. And for this third target, right, they're told, as I said to you, that it's in 1976, and they're told what the event arc of time is. And these individuals, because some of them were trained in coordinate remote viewing and had not yet been trained in extended remote viewing, and others had gone to extended remote viewing and beyond with me. So they were told, you can do whichever you choose to do, but you cannot jump up and try ERV if you have not been trained in ERV. You do CRV. So the data comes in differently for extended remote viewers. The summaries are the same, but the way in which you develop the data is different. Coordinate remote viewers go page to page to page to page, and the structure works seamlessly through the pages. Extended remote viewers use what are called focus questions. And focus questions are benign questions that are not leading. They're very difficult to write. And those focus questions cause the viewers who are going to be in a theta brainwave state, which means you're not necessarily going to be consciously aware. You're not sitting at a table working. Typically, you're lying down with a blindfold on in a theta brainwave state. And you're rolling your focus questions around and around, because when you are ending your session, you have to rapidly build what's called a nonlinear mind map around each one of those focus questions. So around the focus question, it could be describe any energetics. So now it could be this, I saw this brilliant light, this heat, this kind of thing, shaking, vibration. And the focus, as you build nonlinearly around it, it's the perfect way to work, because the things that stops you when you're a creative that's trying to remember and recall things like that and pull it down, the thing that stops you is that your brain automatically tries to put it in an outline form, indicating that, number one, focus question is most important, and number two is not, and number three is less, and number four is even less, right? So what starts to happen is your brain starts trying to rank, order, and file everything, and that causes you to stumble, and your recall diminishes. When you just do a nonlinear mind map dump around focus questions, you get far more data. And in fact, in studies, up to 70 times better recall than you get from just trying to follow an outline and pull something down. Makes a huge difference. So that was what we did with these and doing that last one. So let's go back to target 1. And there again, I want to point out at this point that the viewers don't know, they do not know if target 1A is 9,000 feet or target 1D is 9,000 feet. They're not told that. They're just told there will be different altitudes, but they don't know which one's which. As I am briefing it to you here, I'm putting it there so that you can see it. I did increment it up pretty evenly, that it was 1 and then B, and C and D higher, but they didn't know that. It could have been completely reversed, or I could have mixed them up. But just for simplicity's sake in the briefing and simplicity's sake in the compiling and the analysis and harvesting of the data, this is how I positioned it. This is how the target sheet looks. They get this, right, like this. Now you'll notice that you can see things below this.
Yeah, you can see roads, but that's
right. This is called a mask. Now the mask is the 3% mask. Now the reason that a 3% mask is there is because the viewers can't tell what it is. I mean, they don't know what I'm looking for there. They don't have any idea what I'm asking them to look at. I'm just looking for hot spots there. The reason you do a mask on it that has, a 3% reveal is because it stops the viewers mind from quibbling with itself over what might this be, what's under here. And so that 3% mask, some people are like, oh yeah, but you're giving it away because they can see. It gives nothing away. It doesn't give anything away for them. And they can't lift the mask to look behind it because that's not how it's given to them. It's sealed that way and they can't unmask it. And so it helps them just stop quibbling with themselves and wondering about what might be there. And all they do is sense, just sense and find those hot spots. Now, when all of the data is compiled from
Dave, let me stop you. When they got the mask, were those points listed there as well, or was it blank?
Oh no, those points aren't there. That's what a view.
Okay, no, that's
yeah.
No,
This is
that's
showing,
key.
Yeah. So a viewer senses 0.1, PT1 there, and they put their little X on the ground there, and it would just be in their handwriting, right? And then PT1. So then they go write their summary for that PT1, verbal, visual, sensory data that pertains to what they sense there. And then PT2, they do the same thing, right? Then PT3, they do the same thing. They sense it, then they go write about it.
So to be 100% clear, what they saw was this, except you would remove 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. The target 1 alpha at the top was probably not there. Your logo was not there.
Target
and then
1
the
alpha is there. My logo is not there, and target 1 alpha is not there. The logo is there because I don't want people capturing the briefing and screenshots, so that they only have a blank sheet with mask on it, 3% reveal and target 1A. That's what they know. They have to keep it tracked that it's target 1A because they get target 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D.
Right.
They come in rapid sequence to them and they're given those very quickly. So they have to keep them straight. If it's just a blank piece of paper, it would be very difficult for them to be able to capture based on that, right?
Yeah. So they have no clue where 0.1, 0.3, 0.4, 0.2 are.
None. That's not even on there. I'm just illustrating.
Yeah. Sorry to beat a dead horse. I want to make sure the audience fully understands that. Yeah.
I got it. Yeah. It's a good point. They have to sense that point and put it on there and then go, do that piece that I showed you. They have to write it. They don't just put a point on there and be done with it. They have to tell me what they sensed there. They feel a hot spot or a cold spot, or they see a dark spot, or whatever it is, or a bright spot, but you have to tell me what's there. What is there under the mask? You have to tell me that. Why was that a hot spot for you? That's essentially what I'm looking for. So once that's all done and things are all compiled from the 70 viewers, you end up with something that looks like this. Now, this is a summary map for me. This is what gets briefed to Travis, Eric, et cetera.
This is the aggregate of all the remote viewers.
Right.
Yeah.
And the red circles are major clusters, and then there are minor clusters. And then you look around there and you can see some, as I said, there are outliers. And those clusters could have been more inclusive of other things, but you go with a fixed diameter and you're trying to cluster in a fixed diameter based on the elevation that you're in. But this changes now as you get to, the other higher up, go from 9 to 12 to, to 42 to 100 miles, et cetera. And we'll show you that. So there again, just talking about the summary process at the different altitudes. And this kind of tells you, the volumes of data. So for just the total average data that is possible for a 70-person RV team is, in one target is 2,240 to 2,520 pages of data, combined verbal, visual data for analysis, and 280 sensed points of data to be clustered on one target. And then if you look at, for the total of target 1, A, B, C, and D, you're talking upwards of 9,000 pages to 10,000 pages of verbal and visual data, and over 1,120 sensed points for clustering analysis. That's what remote viewing produces, that kind of data. Now, in this case, those are potential marks for, viewers that have been well-trained in map sensing and that kind of stuff. We didn't reach that number here. We reached about half that number, maybe closer to all in total, somewhere around 6,000 pages. The verbal data ended up being something that we figured that we weren't going to be able to use on camera. I mean, nobody wants to see me type out, on a screen, on a briefing slide, 5 slides of verbal sensory data. That's something, for something else. That's for a book or something, something else, but it's not going to be on a 6-minute segment on History Channel. But, Travis, I know, and Eric were both looking at that and just going like, holy cow, man. That's when Travis brought up the question, like, do you have AI? I mean, are you using AI to assemble all this stuff? It's like, yeah, I wish. I really wish, but no. Again, just showing how the vertical sensing is capable of doing, and again, how that was all worked, and shows again for those things, how that all worked. And then the past time target for CRV and ERV. And again, we were looking for validating information already known or suspected. We're looking at trying to answer additional questions regarding specific hotspots and provide enough additional data to help investigators on site fine-tune their investigative efforts around the target site. That was the objective, and that would be the objective going forward with this. Okay, so here's the target package that you get for the horizontal map sensing target. Again, you get this one, target 1A, you get this one. Again, you see there's 3% mask, 3% mask, 3% mask. Now, on this one, the target that I got underneath here, I actually couldn't use the map. This is not the map that was used under there. I have this one here, and I have it there because I know that in these briefings, when you see it, and I had this in there for the briefing for Travis and Eric, because I knew that they were going to want to see what the land features are around there at 100 miles up. So this is not what the viewers got, but this is what Travis and Eric were briefed on, because there had to be a visual there for them. So they sensed those things, and here's how the feedback came out of it. So the combined data from the 70 viewers for target 1A at 900 above ground level, AGL, looks like this. This was the clustering. Now, that doesn't mean anything until you do this. Now there's a reveal.
Oh, wow.
And when there's
interesting.
a reveal, now you start to see where the hotspots were sensed by viewers around the ranch itself. Which
it's like in the wood line, it's in the woods and along the roads. Yeah, it's like along the roads and the wood line, or not wood line, but the woods.
In the woods, yeah. And
then on the ranch,
places around the ranch, yeah.
Yeah.
And so then the next one, this one is the clustering for 1B, which is 12,000 AGL. And then on the reveal, look how the clustering is reshaped now, because the viewers are up higher, so they're seeing a bigger piece of the terrain. And when you do the reveal, it's completely different clustering, right? But very similar clustering. Now you start to see that most of the clusters, other than those that are way up there to the northeast in the right-hand corner of the slide, the others are along the ranch road and cross the ranch and deep into the trees. Now, as it turns out, most of the activity, this I find out as I'm briefing it, most of what took place at this ranch took place out in those trees. And this part kind of freaked Katie out, because this is where she had her experience there as a teenager. And there's a big attachment to these trees. And so the next one, which is 42,000 feet, you can see again how you get up higher, you're 3 times as high. And now look how the clusters start to elongate even more. You just also start to see more outliers. I probably could have done some minor clustering of some of that stuff, but the outliers that are there, they're just, at that point, it's okay. It's unimportant to the overall picture that we're capturing here. But in the reveal for this one, now you can see, again, how it's elongating through those trees. And it's almost, without knowing where it's going or what it's doing, it's pretty obvious that it's following a path. Now, here is where that ranch is right here. If you can see my cursor, that's it right there. Okay. That's where the ranch is. But now look at all this stuff through these trees and continuing to go. And so then on the next one, the clustering remains elongated, and then it goes all the way. This is where the ranch is, but the clustering now moves all the way through the trees, right straight up to the Rocky Mountains. Pikes Peak is south here. There's all sorts of mining and other things that go on in here. And there's a lot of, to use their term, high strangeness that occurs in this particular area. A great deal of high strangeness. So this gets modeled in a different way, and I'll show you later. And then I don't want to go through this combined verbal and visual data just too much, because this just gets, I'm going to move really quickly through this.
Yeah.
These are just some of the sketches that came out of yours. And because in this first target, what I'm really looking for, as I said to you, I'm looking for ranch landmarks, ranch and landmarks. I'm looking for stuff that lets me know that the viewers are looking in the place where I wanted them to be looking. And I can tell that by verbal sensory data, and I can tell that by visual sensory data. The verbal sensory data was, I mean, it's just volumes of this kind of thing that are here. Like, this stuff does.
I think there's lots of stuff with hums, right?
Yeah, but we'll get to that. The things that the viewers are talking about here are just like, there's electric crackling sounds associated with the object that was there. This is from a sensing now, okay? You sense a hotspot, and then viewers go in and describe it. Now, this is an aggregate of a number of viewers creating this number one here. And then same thing for number two and number three. This is not individual viewer doing that. This is an aggregate of harvested data that comes out of there. This tower and probably radar, radio, blah, 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 small house, nondescript, surrounded by a horizontal split rail type fence and other man-made structures, undulating terrain, reminded of ammunition magazines on a military base, those kinds of things. And it just gets more and more and more, sense of control, something being controlled, man-made objects having the following characteristics. There's a tower with an X support structure surrounded by fencing, and there's mild energy associated with the location. Detect a cave or a tunnel, cold. I just started listing stuff. And this is like when we sat with the directors, they're like, yeah, we can't use that. I mean, we can't use that. Now, we can't show that. We can have voiceover and talk about it, but it takes too much time. These are not seductive little sound bites that they can use in the midst of a missile launch.
And they're not visually appealing, right? They're just words.
They don't mean anything to anybody. They mean a great deal to me, and they mean a great deal to the viewers, but that's because I know what they're doing and what they're perceiving. But I'm using that kind of data to determine, are they where they need to be? So again, here, I don't have anybody describing the Titanic. I don't have anybody describing a beach scene to me. I don't have, you know what I mean? I have people describing verbal and visual data, describing precisely the place where I now know that they're on target. Okay.
Right.
That's just my job as the analyst, as the program manager, to make those determinations. So pulling up simple sketches like this from different viewers, this sketch of this structure, different viewers do different things for different reasons, but they're correlating this, like correlate this to target 2.4. I'm just taking the viewer's notes and putting it over here so you can see that this is how the viewer does that for themselves. They go, oh, this is on target 2.4. This is where I got this, right? So pay attention to this. The viewer described as a silo or an empty pipe. Now I'll show you. Obviously windmills and more structures on the corner.
Yeah, there's
off in the distance, right? This was a stage 3. It's off in the distance. That's Pikes Peak. There were dry water and lakes around there. Pikes Peak is easily visible from this place. This kind of a water tank and stuff, you'll see a little bit more of this. Trees around a structure, roads described as, dirt roads, that kind of stuff. Again, here, just simple. This is a contour sketch. This is like a stage 2 contour sketch for a coordinate remote viewer. And they're required to probe them and label them or label them. So you can see a probe mark down here, and there's probably a probe mark. That's a probe mark right there. But the viewer, after sketching this contour sketch, says Rocky Mountains, which indeed would be good. Now that if they say Rocky Mountains, they have to immediately go to the right-hand side of the page and declare an AOL. Because why?
If they mean the actual geographic location of the Rocky Mountains, but it could also just be,
even if it's a noun, it becomes an analytical overlay. So whether it's describing mountains made of rock or the Rocky Mountains. So it can be a proper noun and any other kind of noun. If it's that, if you're calling it the name of something that you have to declare it as an AOL. And that's just the rules. It's not that it's wrong data or that AOLs are wrong data. They're a category of data, but they're a category of data that can be usable. And they're also a category of data that can simply drive the train from the moment you accept it, right? So let's just say that the viewer comes up with Rocky Mountains there, and then the next point that they sense, they just only describe Rocky Mountains, when in fact, the target's close to the Rocky Mountains, but the target is not the Rocky Mountains. You understand what I mean? So that's why viewers have to declare AOLs, analytical overlay, and they have to attempt to disengage from that. They have all these little clever phrases that we used to teach and don't anymore. At this point, it's either AOL or AOL Drive. And they used to call it AOL Drive, AOL ratcheting, AOL peacocking. I mean, it was like, okay, I get it. I mean, I understand. And it meant that, AOL ratcheting is like the same AOL keeps coming back and coming back and coming back with more embellishment. And AOL peacocking means that it embellishes fully because it unfolds like a peacock's tail. It means it just goes from, every time you put your pen back on the paper, it becomes more embellished, same thing, Rocky Mountains, but something else with it, ski slopes, lift chairs, whatever it might be. And that's not what we want them doing. This lights flashing and the metallic tower, very much part of the site. So is that stake truck and those kinds of things. Other things that came out of target 1 and 2, this staging area, these arrow shapes here, which were later described as vehicles, and we'll talk about that. This one here, again, you, Sean, are the one that told me what these things are. People call them Tic Tacs. And the staging area, this is one drawing of it, and then you're going to see a different drawing later by a different viewer that draws something very similar with lots of these staging in this place. In the analysis of this stuff, you start to learn how viewers draw energetics. They're not trying to draw texture. They're trying to show an energetic representation of something that has a depth to it, right? Mm-hmm. The arrow shape, this is a very simple stage 2, again, a contour drawing. You'll see them take on different form by different viewers in different times. This right here is a depiction of something moving, like a vortex or a craft. It hits a wall, bounces off the wall, but it's invisible and it's made of a force or an energy. Here's more of these. I suspect these little guys, cluster of lights moving rapidly across the night sky. Remember, this is just from dowsing. Here's a different viewer drawing this tower. Here's more of these undulating structures or landforms down here. Jagged, barren road, a void, the temperature's cool, point of light. Here again, dark interior and a point of light. Rounded depression, not a pond or water or wet. Here's a staked fence, etc. Man-made structures. This is just the stuff that was harvested for camera value. I can't tell you the thousands of other things that were just left because we simply didn't have enough time to even think that they were going to be able to look at them. And this was just the most visually impactful, which is why it got there. But even in terms of the visually impactful sketches done by these viewers in target 1 and 2, this is just target 1 and 2. This isn't even really coordinate remote viewing or extended remote viewing. This is the sensing and then using whatever protocol you have to describe what point it is that you sensed. So the whole idea of things being, these rock mountains and tunnels and, life forms, viewers are taught to describe instead of saying humans or aliens or something else, even dogs, it would be a life form, Right. That's how they describe it. You can get an idea there what they're doing, and it just gets more elaborate and more elaborate, different viewers drawing different things, train tracks moving into mountains and caves. And here's a gray metal door that has a key code entry point on it. if you saw the episode, you remembered that there was a cistern that was used for water. It had this piece up top here.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a place where they actually picked up a bunch of weird readings and things. And here's the viewers sketching this kind of thing. Here's another depiction of that wedge, only it's moving up and there's a whooshing sound through the air, very silent and fast, super silent, super fast. A black unmarked helicopter. The Air Force Academy is not far. And I mean, people get crazy about black unmarked helicopters. Most of the time, if you see a Black Hawk fly overhead at 10,000 feet, if you don't know what you're looking for, you can't see U.S. Army on it. I don't know of any black helicopters that just fly around for being black helicopters. Sometimes police helicopters or maybe a private helicopter, but they all have to have visible tail numbers. And you can't fly any kind of an aircraft around. The military is black on black or a darker black on a grayer black. Those kinds of things, but they all have tail numbers. They're all referred to by some sort of number on the craft. More stuff that came out of Target 1 and 2. More stuff that came out of Target 1 and 2. Now you're starting to see more of these control towers and communications. And here again, mountaintop, again, probably Pikes Peak.
Right.
Yeah, snows and impossible floating spectrum, electrical, isolated, cookpit negative, land, coal cooling, airy, captivating, bomb ridges, as in ridge lines, octagon shaped honeycomb matrix. I mean, none of these things mean anything until you recognize that you have, out of 70 viewers, you've got 30 of them drawing the same kinds of things in different ways, or you have 25 of them, sometimes out of 70 of them. It just all depends, but it's correlated data. I don't know what this is on the left. I mean, we can read what they're calling it, but it's more like a flight suit. I found out after this was all over that there were 2 A-7 Corsairs in the 70s that crashed right on this ranch, crashed right into the trees. The people that looked at it, and you can probably read about it in these books, but the people that described it, Katie described it, that said it was like something swatted them out of the air. They were coming on an approach probably for the Air Force Academy, and they just, both craft at the same time, just went nose down and crashed into the trees on the ranch. And they would have had to have been at a pretty good altitude, even if they were doing a long approach into, the runway at the Air Force Academy. I mean, if they were going to do a straight in, long extended, final or something like that, or even if they were downwind to get into the pattern, they still at this point would have been probably at 9,000 feet, maybe more. So that was a big deal. You're starting to, see different representations of things, arrows, and all of this stuff becomes things that are spiraling down, as it says, like compass arrows, but it's spiraling down. There's something inside of them. Over here, you're seeing motion. The sketch is not real dark, but motion, energy, or plasma, instrumentation, concept of words, we go in peace, all those kinds of things, right? Gets stranger and stranger the deeper we get into these kinds of things. These are other viewers. These are depictions of vortices, right? There are pictures of vortices or of power, energy, things like that. That's how that's described. Base, foundation. They're talking about a magnetic bed or bed magnetic structure, beams, those kinds of things, just showing variation in it. Here again, waveforms like electricity or static. So here again, right? Despite what that might look like, it's a buoy, sensing, buoying. There's a buoy there sensing approaches. This mountain, again, that may be actually the one I showed earlier.
Yeah.
Here's another viewer coming up, or different viewers coming up. These two are the same, I believe. This is a different viewer, but dark glaseous substance coming out from under a structure with one wall and a roof. I was viewing it from above. There was a red sphere that had layers of energy unfurling from its outer layer. And so outer layers, you can see here, this is the sphere itself, but it's described as a red sphere with layers of energy emanating out, kind of unfurling. And this is the depiction of it unfurling, looking up. So I like this kind of a thing, like opening up like that. So again, kind of combined conclusions. This is me, again, just taking these thousands of pages and going through and going, okay, if I'm looking at the correlation of what all the viewers were producing, the area is heavy with activity, government, otherworldly, unexplained hype, strangeness, and possibilities. It's riddled with openings and closings above and below the ground, as explained by multiple remote viewers, a hub of transportation and travel. This means more much later on here. There's a presence here that's felt but rarely seen, perhaps more active in the past than now, but present regardless. Viewers perceived a UFO, UAP activity, as well as strange life forms, energetics, devices, portals, vortices, openings, and more. The area of interest expands well outside the boundaries of the specified target, meaning the ranch. And it seems to primarily follow a massive corridor of activity coming from the Western mountains. Certainly warrants further investigation. So what is the vertical map sensing and the horizontal map sensing look like? Well, let's look at the vertical. I showed you what the horizontal looks like, but let's look now what it looks like when we're able to portray it in a vertical 3D model. It looks like this.
And this is what you showed on the Beyond Skinwalker Ranch.
I showed them all of this. And then, yeah, this is the one that they picked because when this came up, that's when Katie and the other folks turned around and went, oh, look, that's where the cistern is. In this particular large cluster here, this is where Katie and others that were there experienced, these encounters with life forms. They described them as white fuzzies and other kinds of things, right? And boxes and cubes and orbs and other things were described out there. This is where she had one of her really terrifying episodes, and with a whole bunch of adults around who were experiencing it in the same way, where they felt that they were frozen in their own tracks and they couldn't move and that they couldn't think and they couldn't see well and they couldn't hear well or communicate with each other. It's like they were scanned and stunned at the same time, I guess, is the best way I can describe it based on how it was described. So those clusters, the major and minor clusters, are now depicted where they were, but they're depicted in a three-dimensional form as best we can. They're probably better models, but time didn't permit the finding and use of better modeling. But this shows where that clustering was on the ranch. Now, also, we didn't cover it too much, but in the vertical sensing where we were going, through the 500 meters, we were dividing that up and looking. There was also a tasking to go up to a certain height and to go to a certain depth in there as well. And that ends up producing this, which meant that when they were vertically clustering, right, and they're going 1, 2, 3, 4, when you now put that down on there, and the red ones correlate perfectly with the horizontal sensing, that's how you position this stuff where it is on the ranch in kind of a geospatial perspective. And it was really interesting because they're going down to 10,000 feet in depth in the ground. And I didn't want to start describing, I didn't want to start problem solving here. The very first fracking was done less than a kilometer away in 1951. The aquifer here is pretty much gone now. It's pretty much wasted. There used to be a lot of that swivel point, where they would sink a well straight down and then you run the sprayer around and they would grow crops and things like that there. If you look at this particular area, like on a Google Earth or something like that, and you look around, you will see very clearly that they don't do any of that kind of agriculture there now. There's no water below. There are some rivers and streams, and there are some places where they actually pump up out of the river or stream and then irrigate that way, but they can't really find a place to dig down and drill down into the aquifer, which means there has to be huge cavernous areas down there that are just totally dry or empty, or maybe they're moist. I have no idea. But clearly in this, the viewers were sensing hotspots, activity, high strangeness areas, not only above on the surface, but below the surface. And I was actually told not to brief this. I was told not to brief the below the ground stuff. But,
The producers didn't want to spend money when the moment Travis started wanting to drill, right?
yeah,
That's what that's
essentially,
about.
Yeah. But
it's understandable. They have a
yeah.
budget and they have to keep to a budget. That's not the way I would deal with it, but to each his own, right? I mean, I'd rather just I'd rather just show Travis the data and say, look, we don't have the budget to dig, but we want to make sure you have all the data.
I briefed it anyway. Yeah. So, but you notice they didn't use it. They used that one. But anyway, again, just the viewers' summary comments and other things for target 1 and 2. There's lots of electric or energetic signatures all over the place. People are saying languages I didn't understand. Again, these are amalgamations. These are not just what one viewer said. These are what dozens of viewers out of 70 viewers said. Otherworldly presence, again, beings and structures and crafts and bodies I am sensing are calm. There's jewel-like, life forms attractive and soothing. No judgment of us. Vehicles at the altitude are not man-made, just on and on, that kind of stuff. So as the program manager doing this, you're like, okay, yeah, these guys are doing well. They're coming back with what I need from them. Now, another point of the protocol here is this is not briefed to them. They are not briefed on this, because if I showed them all this as we were working these 3 targets, then every target would lead into the next as analytical overlay, would lead into the next as analytical overlay. I'm sure that, on occasion, 1 or 2 or 3 of them would get together in some little chat group somewhere and start talking about amongst themselves about what they saw. But it is not something that I did, which they didn't get this briefing until we were done. We were finished. Mm-hmm. Then I gave them the briefing. So this becomes the pastime target, which I told you was from 2100 on the 3rd of April, 1976 till 03 on the 4th of April, 1976. And again, this is where they started off. And again, this is stuff that would never make it on the television because it's verbal sensory data and they want to see visuals. So you go more verbal sensory data, more verbal sensory data, more verbal sensory data. And remember, this is fractional to the amount of verbal sensory data that's out there. So do you want me to now go into this part, like boxes and cubes and those kinds of things?
Yeah. Why don't we end the episode now, and then we'll go into we'll cover it in the next episode, which will ultimately focus on the data suggesting UAPs. But I think this is probably a good place to stop. So anyway, the methodology was fascinating. The project was unprecedented. And thank you for sharing it with me first, at least publicly.
Yeah, it's the first time it's been heard.
All right. I'll see you on the next episode in this series, my friend.
Okay. Thanks, Sean.
If you enjoyed this video, please click on like, subscribe, and the notification button so that you're alerted anytime I post something new.